Okay, let me see if I get everybody in from the waiting room. Looks like we're all good. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sonia Liang, and let me just make a quick introductions, and then we can kickstart with the panel. I'm the director of career services at the Pardee School of Global Studies, and thank you so much for joining us today. Pardee Works is one of our signature event series at the school and created to offer students these direct access to real-world experience and career insights from across the fields of global studies. And these conversation is meant to connect students with professionals like alumni who are actively shaping the world through their impactful work. And tonight is no exception. We're thrilled to welcome three outstanding Pardee alumni, each bringing a unique lens to sustainability and global impact. We're also honored to have Professor Adel Najam join, a former dean of the Pardee School and current president of the Worldwide Fund International, who will be moderating tonight's discussions. So also, it's perfect timing because this conversation coincides with Earth Day, also reminding us of the urgency and relevance of the work that we're doing. So before we begin, I just want to have a couple housekeeping items. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chats throughout the sessions. We will start the panel really soon and then open up for Q&A at about 6 p.m. and then we can wrap up about 6:30. This event is also being recorded. While there's no pressure, we would love for you to keep your video on just to help us to create a connected and engaging space, if that's okay. So with that said, I will turn it over to Professor Najam to just kick off the conversation for us.
Thanks, Sonia. Thanks very much. Greetings, everyone. Wonderful to be here. As Sonia said, happy Earth Day. It's a bit of a somber Earth Day given the state of the world, given the state of the planet, given the state of the environment in general, but that's been true for many Earth Days. But it's wonderful to be with all of you and welcome from Boston University. But also, it's also very wonderful to be with three excellent alumni of what is now the Pardee School. Two of them actually alumni after the Pardee School had turned into a school. So it's wonderful to welcome all three of them. All three of them are working in various ways in the broader field of what you might call sustainable development, of environment and development. And they join us from different parts of the US. I'm not going to go into introductions, in fact, simply because I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. But the most important part of that introduction really is that all three are our alumni. And we have Cameron Davis, who can wave so that you all see which of the windows he's in. And he is joining us from Illinois. Also joining us from Illinois is Eric. Eric Bindler, who was here with us, graduated, what, 2017, right, Eric? Uh, Cameron is, of course, a different generation. Was it 87 you said, or 87 graduate? And now
86.
finally, we also have Saliha Agha, who is also joining us today from Los Angeles, from California. And she graduated, I think, in what year, Saliha?
2017,
2017 too. So we have two 2017s, and all three of them, as I said, are working in various aspects of sustainable development. They come to you from with experience in government and governance and public service, which is Cameron, from working in the nonprofit or NGO sector, which is Erica, in some ways Salia too, but Salia much more now in the think tank sector, though none of these are totally sort of, totally walled out of each other, and that is maybe one of the things that we will talk about. So as I said, it is wonderful to have all of them here, and let me launch this discussion by just asking them to tell us a bit about their journey from here at the Pardee School to where they are now, but especially in terms of what brought them to the careers that they are pursuing, and what in that journey do you think is most instructive for our audience? Cameron, why don't I start with you?
Great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, and it's great to be with fellow BU alums and students. Hi, everybody. Happy Earth Day, happy Earth Week, month, and year, and decade, and generation. I started my first 2 years at the College of General Studies. To be brutally honest, I was a horrible student in high school for the first 2 years. Didn't really take an interest in anything. And then something kicked in junior year, and I just couldn't learn enough fast enough. I would take a French class. I took French and Spanish during the day, and I would walk into one class, speak Spanish and French in French class, and speak French and Spanish class. That's how eager I was to start learning and to go global. At CGS, we had to do a capstone project, and our capstone project was to pick something that was interdisciplinary. It tied together all the topics that we had learned about, and we had learned about international relations, about science, biology, social, and so on and so forth. And my team and I picked acid rain, which was created in the US and essentially harmed Canada. And it got me very interested in combining two passions of mine. Number one, the environment, which I think we can all agree on is a really important place for all of us. And then second of all, how countries are able to work together to solve environmental problems, even though there's nothing that really compels them to have to do it. What brings them to the table? And that got me really interested in coming back home and working on an ecosystem that I've dedicated my entire 40-year career to, which is the Great Lakes, the largest body of fresh surface water on the planet. That includes Superior, Michigan, Ontario, Erie, and Huron. And how the US and Canada can work together to help strengthen the ecosystem. And by default, other freshwater ecosystems around the world. And BU really was the launch pad for me to get interested in that. I wound up putting myself through law school at night and getting a certification in environmental law. And from there, litigated. I sued the federal government a lot to keep it on task with air pollution rules and water pollution rules. And then from there, wound up taking over as the CEO of an organization, the Alliance for the Great Lakes, here in the Chicago, headquartered in Chicago, and kind of made a promise to myself. And this is going to be one of the important takeaways for you if you are interested in a career in the environment or international relations or both. I made a promise to myself that outside of my day-to-day job, I would work with any elected official who was interested in protecting the environment. I didn't care if they were Republican, Democrat, Independent, or somewhere in between. I was going to help them win elections or re-elections. One of the people that I wound up working with was a state senator who represented a district on the south side of Chicago, from what we call Museum Campus, the Shedd Aquarium Field Museum, for those of you who've been to Chicago, all the way to the Indiana border. He wound up running for US Senate. I helped him. He wound up running for president. I helped him. And then he wound up appointing me to manage a $2 billion fund to restore the Great Lakes. And that, of course, was President Obama. Since that time, I've run for election here in Cook County, that's around Chicago. It's the second largest county in the country, where the job is to set policy for a $1.7 billion agency year to year. Have dedicated my career to water and working with other countries on their shared interest in water. Thank you for the offer to speak.
Thank you. That's a wonderful, wonderful journey to share. And thank you for doing, not just sharing that, but living that journey, because it is an important one and you bring important insights I highlight for our audience when we come to the questions, both what it means to work in the electoral process, either with candidates or as candidate, what it means to work on uh, large physical projects, what it means to work at the state and municipal level. So a number of things there that are all sort of very, very relevant to what we are talking about. You, of course, were here before we had the Pardee School called the Pardee School, and you were here as an undergrad from what I take. Let me go to Saleha, who was in our graduate program and ask her about sort of her journey at Pardee and beyond.
Thanks so much, Professor Adil, and this is a great opportunity to talk about the degree program that I was in as a Fulbright scholar at BU and the Pardee School. I graduated in 2017 for the Global Development Policy program, and my area of expertise was political economy and governance, really priming me to work with international institutions on understanding how global policy is shaped, not only for various important areas of work in international development, but also sustainability, the environment, and the intersection between all of them. And having graduated, I spent the next several years up till now, so a total of around a decade of experience in international development practice. Prior to this, I was working primarily in Pakistan, helping to shape policy with the federal government around poverty alleviation and sustainable development goals and how they apply to the local context, especially in regard to the country's vision for the next decade. And once graduating, I felt that I was in a position of knowing exactly how the insides of institutions work and how they interact with one another. And I worked with different donors, bilateral donors like USAID, which currently is its functions have been culminated. I've worked with the UN network, especially UNICEF on maternal health. And I've worked with also in the environmental space with a think tank called the Pakistan China Institute, primarily on forming communication strategy, but also looking at how new areas of research along the One Belt, One Road initiative could open space for a better environmental portfolio with regard to the projects that are being signed between the state and the state-owned institutions and the Pakistani government. So we're really sort of in my array of experience, I've worked across different institutions, whether it's think tanks, whether it's the INGOs, or direct agencies that implement programs with local partners, implementing partners on ground in the developing world. My focus has been in South Asia. That's also where I'm from, in Pakistan. But a lot of my recent experience has been sitting on the West Coast and establishing a practice of my own solely, independently consulting and helping different programs and projects around the world to make sure that they're able to establish a mechanism of following through the impact that they're creating and making sure that a lot of the money that's now being brought in a lot through the private sector as the aid economy evolves is being channeled in the right way, and impact is being created and followed in the right way. So as an M&E analyst, which is primarily what my work has been, it has been
M&E for everyone is monitoring and evaluation, right?
monitoring evaluation, yes. Sort of touching on a couple of areas of expertise, and I think that's really what led for me to be adaptable in this constantly changing environment when it comes to sustainability work, is having a bit of that technical expertise, working with data, monitoring and evaluation of programs, but then also having that strong policy background to go along with it, the theory to go with the practice. And I think that it's been a wonderful journey so far, and I'm now pivoting a little bit more towards the side of agriculture and looking at sustainable agriculture and food systems, primarily in South Asia, and planning on something a little crazy. And I say crazy because I'm going from, sitting on a desk to perhaps possibly starting my own traditional farming practice, and using really local knowledge and community-based decades and decades of experience, and sort of honing that in and seeing how we can do it in a smart and sustainable way. So that's sort of where I see myself going. But I think that what the school really did for me, what the program did for me, was give me that strong base, that mindset to see things through different lens. Especially one of the main things that I learned was the idea of political ecology, and how vulnerability and adaptability to environmental challenges, man-made problems, and natural disaster are felt unequally. And understanding that social lens to environmental problems is very, very important. And I think that I owe that to the sensitization that I received through some of the professors that offered very wonderful programs at Pardee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, including for those kind words. Let me move then to Eric. I think it's already becoming clear, or should become clear to everyone, what we call sustainable development, even what we call environment, sustainable development being much broader, has many pathways, and that's one of the things that we want to explore as we get into this conversation. Right? Unlike many other fields where there is a very simple, clear door that says this is mechanical engineering, and this is civil engineering, and this is medicine. The world that we operate in, the world we hope you will operate in, has many pathways and many avenues to follow, and it's good to know that right at the beginning. But we will come to that. But first, Eric, a word about your journey and lessons from it.
Sure. Thanks a lot for being here. Really appreciate the opportunity, and great to see everyone. Yeah, I mean, on that note, my journey has been probably even more kind of circuitous than most. I actually started out my undergrad. I studied music and anthropology, and my undergrad in Florida. Decided to try to pursue a PhD in that field. It's called ethnomusicology. If anybody's interested, there's a couple, I think, jokes about it in the latest a Disney movie recently. But it's a very, very niche field. I was working on a master's and then a PhD in it. Ultimately decided for a number of reasons that I needed to kind of pivot, and just started reading a lot of other things that I hadn't really been reading when I was doing music and anthropology, and got really interested in economics, got really interested in climate. And so that, combined interest led me to Pardee, and to join the master's program, the Global Development Policy program. I was actually classmates with Salaha. And so really nice to be on a panel with her again. But my journey through Pardee, I really kind of went into it with that dual interest. But I think especially during my time there, the importance of climate, of environmental issues, and especially water. It was actually a class with Dean Najam that really drove home for me the role of water, the importance of water in kind of the broader kind of climate and sustainable development conversation. And just, the idea that if we had been, or we have been living in an age of mitigation, or attempting to, we're now moving into more of an age of adaptation, where we need to understand not just the energy conversation around climate, and how do we change our energy system to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also how do we live with water better, right? How do we improve our water infrastructure? How do we manage our water resources? to adapt to the changes that we will see, that we've already kind of baked into the climate system, whether that be too much water, too little water, poor quality water, things like that. And so that, I think that core kind of insight drove me forward to really try to seek out a way that I could, work in the water industry. I didn't really know what that meant. But I had an opportunity to have a couple really good internships during my time at BU. One of them for a couple months during, the summer between my classes was actually the Public Works Department out in Needham. So I got to just see a little bit about kind of how local government, local kind of utility department manages their water systems, manages also their waste, their solid waste and recycling and things like that. But then ultimately, my final semester, I interned at a company called Bluefield Research, which is a small kind of water industry market research firm out there in Boston, and basically stuck around for 7 years after that. I graduated. I kept working for them remotely, bounced around down to Florida, up here to Chicago, and just really fell in love with the water industry, with the people that work there, and with the issues that we face day to day. And so actually just about 3 months ago, I left Bluefield. I joined a company called Xylem, which is one of the biggest water technology companies in the world. We make everything from pumps to treatment technology to smart meters to software. And so really a great opportunity to take my skills, my knowledge from Bluefield, but also from my time at Pardee, and kind of bring that to bear in a much larger, it's admittedly more corporate environment. And as far as what I do, I guess that's probably, maybe I should have led with that, but the kind of career, the skill set that I've developed since leaving Pardee is basically market intelligence. And so what my job is just to keep track of what's happening in the world, essentially, to keep track of what's happening in the water industry, to keep track of what's happening from a policy perspective, different types of, environmental policies, economic policies, trade policies, industrial policies that impact water and the niches of the water sector that my company plays in, to keep track of what's happening kind of in the broader macroeconomic environment, keep track of what other companies, what other stakeholders, what other players in the water industry are doing, and to essentially help our strategy team, help our senior leadership kind of decide how to respond and how to structure their response to these constant shifts that we're seeing in the world. And I think a lot of just the broad base of knowledge that I developed at Pardee, again, understanding policy, understanding macroeconomics and finance to a certain extent, just all of those skill sets have been really beneficial for me in my career.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much, and I particularly appreciate your recalling the class and also talking about water, as Cameron also did, and referring to partly what any student in any of my classes would have heard, that water is to climate adaptation, what carbon is to climate mitigation. The future is really water in scary ways as well as in interesting ways. What you've heard now is a set, and you've all been very kind in your words about the Pardee School, but I wanted to just highlight, you've also heard multiple pathways, as I was saying. There is the electoral pathway, there is the government pathway in general, there is the think tank and NGO pathway, there is the action pathway always in all of these, and also the private sector pathway, right? And that's what I would come to, just by way of a little advertisement for the three of you. The students would know this. We are celebrating, and it still gives me goosebumps as well as a surprise. We are now celebrating the 10th year of the Pardee School. And so this is, Cameron, all after you. But it still sounds amazing to me that it's been 10 years since we started the school. I remember the first year when we would brag brashly about being the new kids on the block. And this is kind of the time when both Eric and Saleha came soon after that. But time flies and the world changes. And one of those ways, and I will also mention this, Cameron, for your benefit. I don't know if it was because of you, but soon after you left, what has now the Pardee School started, what I am quite sure, I've tried to check, and as far as I can tell, the country's first program in international affairs and environment. And that's partly what I was hired for at that time. But the reason I mention all of this is that not only are there multiple pathways, but the world also keeps changing, right? What it means to work in the environment field, or what it means to work in development, or what it means to work in water even, has changed and keeps changing. It's changed through your careers, and it will keep changing. I say all of that by way of asking my big second sort of broad question, and this is to all of you and anyone if you can start, which is looking back at the journey that you've just described, what is the most important, and I'm going to start with this rather than end with this, what is the most important advice that you would give to everyone who's on this in this conversation, especially the faces that are looking at you thinking about, okay, I want to be going out there and looking for a job, looking about thinking not just of a job but a career. How do I do this? This is big, this is difficult. We'll come to the times we are in, but looking back, having done all that you are doing and having done all that you have done, what is the best career advice, especially related to jobs, that you would give to those who are on the call? Okay.
I think there are two answers to that. One of them is you have to have a really honest discussion with yourself about why you want to do what you want to do. I don't care what the career is, the career path that you start down, but they're all going to be very challenging. And so you better have a very clear sense of why you want to do what you want to do. Just to use myself as a lab rat and an example here, I decided a long time ago, I can't recall whether it was in high school or maybe my sophomore year at BU, where I decided that I had grown up in a very privileged setting, and that it was really important to me to take that privilege and turn it around and give back to the world. And the best way I could think of to do that is through working to protect the environment, because we all depend on the environment. It doesn't matter what your age, your religion, your gender, your any other identity. If I wanted to help people, if we want to help people, and if we want to help other living things on the planet, one of the most important things that we can do that touches everything is water. And so for me, it was when I asked the why question, it came back almost to a sense of spirituality and identity. What do I stand for? What is it I want to look back on at the end of life and know that I had done? The second answer to your very good question is, I would say do whatever it takes to break into the field that you want to break into. I started out as a volunteer because even starting out in an NGO, let alone one that didn't pay for, was pay for careers and jobs, was very difficult, very challenging. But I started out as a volunteer, showed that I could work hard and that I was a good team player. And slowly I get elevated to part-time, then full-time. And then I put myself through law school at night in order to provide more value, and just kept reinvesting in myself so that I could reinvest in the career path. So those are the two things that I have found incredibly, helpful. Those two ingredients have been really important parts of the recipe for success.
Mm-hmm. Salia, any thoughts? What's looking back, looking forward, what's the best advice?
Sorry, my screen got stuck for a second. I have a couple of thoughts on this, and I'm trying to place myself in the mindset that I of going into a program like this, being in that impressionable age where I felt that I could, I wanted to save the world. I wanted to do great things that left a good social imprint on the world, right? And I think one of the things that is very important when you decide to put yourself on the path of this career, because it's unique to other careers, is to have the mindset to be resilient to change. And I think that the willingness to recreate yourself along the way definitely needs to be there. And we come out of grad school thinking that we have all of this knowledge. Our head feels heavy, and we know all of the unique ways in which we can go and tackle some of the real problems that we've learned about, and then we're starting from scratch. And so being able to slowly find your way in, knowing that you need to recreate yourself along the way, I think that one of the skills that need to be developed along the way is being cross-disciplinary, and knowing that, like you said, there are crossroads between sustainability, climate change, a lot of work on global health, education. They all are kind of in this network of a complex relationship with one another, and being open to seeing that and being open to dialogue. I think that's one part of it, as one is open to recreate themselves. I think the other part of it is working on some of those hard skills and continuing to grow your knowledge base. And that means nowadays leveraging some of the tools that we have available to us, using skills in data to help your field. And big data is big, and it helps with strategic thinking because it speaks to numbers. I think another thing that is important is having cultural agility and cultural competence, especially if you're working in the international development context outside of the United States. So I think that's sort of the growth piece of it. And then the other aspect of it, for me, outside of understanding that's interdisciplinary, um, is starting early. So I feel like young professionals need to already begin with their with indulging in civic forums and contributing to a lot of these public consultations, just sitting in conversation. Sustainability itself, I think it's not a career alone, it's a mindset. And to develop that mindset means already becoming part of, say, a local food co-op, or contributing to a research paper while in school, or just really seeing how you can begin on it early, and then just kind of letting loose in the reins. And I think those are some of like the suggestions that I'd have in an evolving landscape with sustainability.
Excellent, excellent. And Eric, any thoughts from you that you would give as advice to students who are embarking on their career search, their job search?
Sure, absolutely. I think to echo some of what both Cam and Sela has said, I mean, I think that on the skills piece is something that as I, kind of followed my own career, but also as I, kind of progressed, especially at my former job, Bluefield Research, getting to work with junior analysts who were coming out of school, getting to work with interns, just understanding the skills that make people effective in at least the type of work that I've done, right? And again, there are a lot of different, as we're talking about, there are a lot of different ways to a lot of different careers and kind of pathways and roles and skill sets related to sustainability. But I'd say, something that you can't go wrong with, as Sel has said, with the hard skills, right? With technical skills, with data skills. And it doesn't mean you need to go out and be, you don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be a Python expert. I mean, if you've got that background, that's great. It can be really helpful, but understanding enough to kind of speak the language. I mean, I think I learned some decent, Excel skills while I was at Pardee. I took a statistics class. I've still used at least the basics there in the rest of my career going forward. Just being able to understand and manipulate and work with a data set to kind of draw insights and inferences from data, is really helpful. Again, even if you're not an expert coder, and you don't have to be, but you can, especially as Sally has said, with kind of AI and some of the other newer tools to help make it even easier to work your way around data. Just the world is becoming more driven by data, regardless of what field you're in, regardless of what position you have, and those skills are not going to go to waste. Communication is another really important piece of it as well. I mean, I think one of the things that I've found in my career, going from, again, kind of music and anthropology, writing these, very florid, paragraph long postmodern theory, to writing really succinct, sharp policy memos for Pardee professors, to writing kind of for, business audience, right? You just understanding that it's not just about what you know, but how you communicate it, right? Knowing who your audience is, at what level they're engaging with you, how to operate in different types of templates, whether that be a policy memo, or whether that be a PowerPoint slide deck, or an off the cuff conversation. You're don't forget to invest in those skills as well, right? It's not only about, you know, mastery of the subject matter, but it's about how well you can actually communicate that to the people around you, to kind of affect the change that you're trying to affect, to have the influence, or the impact that you're trying to have. And then I guess one last really very specific point that I want to highlight before I forget, or before, don't get a chance to come back to it, but a very specific piece of career advice that I would give all of you kind of uniquely in this audience is look up something called Mass CEC. It's a nonprofit, kind of a clean tech group based in Boston. They do a couple different things, but they have this really phenomenal internship program, where they basically connect students throughout Boston, throughout the Massachusetts area, that are looking to do work in kind of the clean tech, in the environmental and the water space, and they match them up with companies around the Boston area. And the great thing about it is, if you put your resume in the platform, you get matched with a company. The non-Mass CEC will actually they'll subsidize the salary. So even if you're a small startup, like, my former company, Bluefield Research, was a pretty small company, couldn't necessarily afford to pay a lot of summer interns or fall interns a fair wage, but the Mass CEC would actually subsidize that program. And so it really opens the door to a lot of smaller companies that are, engaged in one way or another with clean energy, with clean technology, with water, to have access to kind of a pool of talent. And so it's an amazing way to get your foot in the door if this is a field that you're interested in, even if you don't want to go into the private sector, but you want to have some experience just understanding how, whether it be a clean tech startup, or an investor, or a market research firm, there's a lot of different ways you can use that program to, again, just to see another side of the industry that maybe you're not familiar with, and see where that takes you. So that would be my more specific piece of advice as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them on the chat, but we will also open up for questions in a few minutes. I have just one or two other questions to ask our guests before we do that. One thing, if I can be back a professor for a few minutes, that I hope people picked up on from what everyone said is, this, I think Saliha called it, be willing to reinvent yourself. And Cameron told us how he's reinvented himself many times, and as did Eric, between anthropology and music and water and companies and so on and so forth. But I do not think this is unique to the three people who are here with us. Right? In some ways, and I'm going to be blunt here, there is sometimes the sense that I will have a degree and the world will be waiting for me out there with a job. It really doesn't work like that. It has never worked like that. It is not supposed to work like that. When you come out, the honest hard truth is that, good times or bad, there will be about 250,000 other people who will also be coming out with degrees. That doesn't matter, because their degrees will be different, yours will be different, your passions will be different. What is common in what you have heard is this idea of having a passion and purpose. I think that is unique to our field, because the people you will be competing with, if you will, in those interviews, will also have the passion or not, will also have the purpose or not. So you have to somehow stand out, and demonstrate that the passion is there and the purpose is there, not just the passion and as in a hobby, but this purpose that all three of them talked about. The other thing, again, by trying to bring out the threads from what you just heard, you heard from all of them the importance of skill. Right? And skills is there is sometimes a sense, oh, but I didn't take any classes on skills. I think as a former dean, I can say that is absolute nonsense. Everything is about skills. When someone asks you to write that paper, that is about the skills that Eric is talking about. That's about communication. When someone is writing, asking you to produce that memo with analysis, that is where monitoring and evaluation skills come from. Right? There are skills that are everywhere, and sometimes we underestimate the skills we have. And in many ways, my own sense, and I'll come to our guests back in just a minute, we sometimes do not realize the skills we have until much later in our career. We are also distracted sometimes by a lot of bad advice, especially on the internet these days. I find it funny, all these sites that seem to be saying, I couldn't find a job myself, so let me tell you how to find one. But that's the sort of little flippant intro to the question I want to ask our guests. As we think of skills, as we think of careers, as we think of the passion that you've talked about, all of you now are at a stage where you have not only developed a career yourself, but you have been in positions where you have seen or participated directly in the hiring of other people, right? And we very often think of careers as what we do. Can all three of you, from your experience now, give us some insights into what you know or think people are looking for when they are hiring someone? Because we very often don't think of that. We think of, okay, what am I going to wear? What am I going to say? But take us into the mindset of potential employers, potential colleagues that we work with. Uh, Cam, I see you're dying to get going.
I am. Thank you for asking that question. And it reminded me that I think if I were to pick out a couple more threads, there are, I think, some other common denominators, whether we've all said it or not. One of them is people skills. With everyone you meet, making sure that you're a good listener is really important, and being helpful and empathetic. We're all wondering what AI is going to mean for the trajectory, whether you're a seasoned vet or just starting out. But one thing that AI will never be able to do is replace the skill of being a people person. Genuinely taking an interest in people. When Eric and I sat down for breakfast a couple of weeks ago, I was really interested in his story, what got him from BU to where he is today. And I think we can find common denominators in just about anybody we meet. We can find common interests in just about anybody we meet. So one thing that I would say is incredibly important are your people skills, honing them, developing them. And I don't mean that to sound like, having people skills is some kind of checklist. Must be empathetic, must be good listener, check. Really, just be a person. I think.
And if you are, it shows.
Yeah. And it's also what makes a career fun too, is the people aspect of it, hearing people's stories, understanding what makes them tick. So I think that's a really important skill to have, is kind of the people skill. The second additional thread I would add, Adil, is we also think of careers as, I am going to be a lawyer. Let's just use myself as an example. When I went to law school, it was, I'm going to be an environmental lawyer, and that's it. I put sideboards around it. But one of the things that I also came to understand very quickly is, you can think of your interests as circles in a Venn diagram. And it's not just about one circle, it's about having other interests like circles that overlap in that Venn diagram. And so when I gave you an example earlier of how I became really interested in politics, because if you think about it, politics are one way in which we make collective decisions. It's one way, it's a system in which decisions are made for either good or bad when it comes to the planet. And so I wanted to understand how the world worked, how it should work, and politics was a good lens through which to do that. So I would start to work with elected officials at the federal level, at the international level, at the state level, at the municipal level, tribal level, and try to figure out how I could be helpful to them, because if I was helpful to them, they could be helpful to the planet. So the other piece of advice that I would give is, as you get established in your career, and even before that, look for opportunities to branch out into other spheres, into other circles of interest. And you will find that there are always ways to make some of those circles overlap in that Venn diagram. And sure enough, back when I went to BU, there was no such thing as international and environment. I had to create that for myself at BU. And as I've, gone through the past 40 years, I've brought those two together and been able to work with people in the environmental community and the international community to try to, stitch together those interests, and then throw the political into it. And you can throw multiple other spheres into it. That will help you as you look for a job, that will help you as you sustain yourself in a job too, because it really is about having a 360-degree view on the problem solving and the issues that you might be working on.
Thank you. Thank you. Saleh, any thoughts, having been at both ends of interviews and seeing things that you have now seen? What do you think employers look for, or are what impresses them, whether in this field or in other fields?
I'm going to be vulnerable here and share that I went through a period of having a hard time finding work, especially coming from the South Asian context and relocating in North America with a lot of experience, local experience, and in the field to sort of more on the planning and policy side of things, from where money is funneled from here to the third world, or to the developing world rather. And I think my learnings come from that struggle and that direct experience that I had of figuring out, what does the other person really want to hear? Is it the picture perfect, long list of things you've done in your resume, or is it something a little more than that? And I think everyone can show for an impressive resume based off of the degrees that we've attained, or the experiences that we have attained prior to going into a field formally. But I think there are three things that I'd mention, which are I think of utmost importance as per my experience. Number one, I couldn't agree more. Communication and soft skills are very important. And a part of that is being a good storyteller. We live in an age of influence, and almost everyone is an influencer, whether it's on social media or whether it's in your career. You need to have a convincing story to tell. And how do you do that? You need to have the research to back it up. You need to have the personality and sway and charisma to go along with it, that you believe in the cause. So if you have that passion, really be unafraid to put it forward in an honest conversation. And coupled with that is some of the other skills that I think are important, which include negotiation skills, diplomacy skills, being able to listen, like some of our other panelists said, but also learn how to negotiate. So it's a two-way street. And I think communication skills are honed in school programs. Like I remember, I'm sure Eric remembers that there was an ADB simulation that we did at the Asian Development Bank, and we students had to sit together and talk about the construction of a dam in Namthun, and figuring out how we as representatives can work with each other and find common ground. And I think that is a skill set that goes across all practice, not only sustainability practice. My third area of experience that I'd share as advice would be this thing called systems thinking. So having the ability to think big picture. Employers or people who want to bring in change makers are looking for people who look outside of the conventional way of doing things, of practice, especially when you have big ideas coming out of school. You need to find out how you can communicate anticipation of, say, anomalies or things that are unintended consequences of something which may be overlooked. So what I'm saying is focusing in on what may be ignored as part of the bigger picture really helps you stand out as someone who comes with that skill set instead of speaking to the narrative that already exists out there. And lastly, there's also a concept of understanding circular economy and how everything is kind of interrelated, interdisciplinary, and we talked about this before, but especially with regard to sustainability practice, this is a kind of thinking that comes up again and again. So definitely look into that.
Thank you, Salia. Thank you very much. And thank you, Cam, also for suggesting Donella Meadows' book on systems thinking. Donella Meadows will be known to many of our students, anyone who's taken Hendrik Celine's classes or mine, Limits to Growth, but thinking about systems. And I wanted to highlight this thing that Salia said. And Salia, please correct me if I get it wrong, but the way I heard you, stories are important. But if you heard everything she said, where do we get these things? Where do we get systems thinking from? Where do we get stories from? Where do we get the ability to tell stories from? Not from Instagram. You get it from your faculty. You get it from your classes. Again, I come back. You can get it from many places, but while you are in college, those papers that you are writing, those assignments that you are doing, those presentations that you are making, each one of them is a prep for your interview. Right? What I want to get at is there is sometimes this sense as if there is a disconnect between what I'm doing here and what I will do in that world. If there were, then I think we would have failed. But I wanted to highlight that you have these resources. They don't need to come out in separate packages. It doesn't have to be a class called storytelling. It has to be your ability. If you do, if you pick up those skills from where they're being taught to you in some ways, again, you do presentations in classes, you write papers in classes, you tell stories in those papers, you make arguments, you start thinking systematically. The question then is, can you also demonstrate that to the quote unquote market? That here is what I have to offer that the other 7 people who are looking for this job may or may not. But let me stop there and ask Eric what he thinks. Help us get into the head of the people who are on the other side of these interviews or conversations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question, and I very much agree with everything Kim and Sela has said. I mean, I think in particular, when I was with my former employer with Bluefield, I did actually get to be quite involved in hiring the last couple of years that I was there, and so I think it all, trying to think of like the bulleted list here, it all kind of blends together in a sense, but you know especially for an employer that's hiring somebody right out of school, the expectation is not that they're going to come in with all or even most of the knowledge that they need to do the job, right? So um, certainly willingness to learn, right? To show that, you have the passion. I mean, we talked about the passion that's maybe a bit endemic to the field that we're in, and that's great. And I think being able to show that look, you may not know everything, and you don't think that you know everything, but you are willing to come in and learn and do what it takes to get the job done. I mean, I think especially, kind of early career hires, not everything that you're going to be asked to work on is going to be the most interesting, the most meaningful or impactful piece of work that you've ever done. Oftentimes, if we're talking even a small company, like, I mean, Bluefield is about 25 people. It was much smaller when I started. There's the overall mission of the company, and then there's what you have to do day to day to kind of get through, right? And there are projects that come up that may seem not at all interesting, not at all exciting, not at all aligned with your interests, your passions, but you still have to kind of show up and show that you're willing to do the work and show that you're willing to get through them. When I was there, we had to do a kind of a consulting project for a client related to trench shoring, which is essentially technology, very, very rudimentary technologies that are used to hold open the trenches when crews are digging up pipes and doing pipe repair work, kind of compacting the soil around it so that the soil doesn't fall in and bury people, right? So it's got a very significant health and kind of health and safety impact, but from a technology standpoint, it was just a very, very strange, very niche thing to be digging into. But I had to do it, right? It was kind of what the client was asking for. It was something that we needed to understand. And so digging in to say, okay, what are the policies here? What are the regulatory landscape that's requiring these types of technologies? What does the training landscape look like? Who are the different types of companies out there that are actually making these different systems? How do they do business? So again, you'll get these things and you're thinking, what am I doing? Why am I spending my time on this random kind of maybe boring or uninspiring project? But you got to kind of get through it, and you have to show that you're willing to do that work, that you're willing to kind of pay your dues and cut your teeth, and understand how that ultimately does feed into the bigger picture, into the broader mission of maybe of your company or organization, if it's a government, if it's I'm sure that this pattern is replicated across all sectors. It's not just the private sector, but understanding how what you're doing contributes to the mission, to the goals of your organization, and ultimately how they contribute to your own personal goals, right? If what you're trying to do with your career is make a positive impact on the planet, how does the knowledge that you're gaining from this exercise, even if it's not the most exciting project, how does it contribute to your own learning and to your own experience and your own evolution in that field? And I think to bring it back to the framing of the question, like that's what when people are hiring, they want to see that work ethic. They want somebody that's going to come in and do the work, that's going to come in and help them solve problems, even if they don't already have years and years of experience and all the knowledge that they need. So just being able to learn, being adaptable in that sense, but also being willing to put in the work and do what you need to do to get the job done.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. And I would again ask everyone, if you have questions, you can write them up or put your hand sign up so that I can start doing a list. I have one more question before I will come to you. So please do think of those questions and please raise your hand. And I'm glad, Eric, you mentioned the point about passion again. You've heard passion a lot. Think about why the employer wants passion, right? If you're in an interview, there are going to be 10, 12, 15 people who are going to be there. The employer has things to be done, and the employer wants people who can do them. That's the skills part, that's the knowledge part, and people who are going to be happy doing them. That's the passion part, right? The passion is not an esoteric idea here. The passion is a very real idea here, that I really want this job, as opposed to coming across, I want any job, right? Because there are many people who are pushing you to get any job. Sometimes we at the school are pushing you, sometimes your parents are pushing you, right? But employer is looking for someone who wants that job, and that's why all of this is important. As I said, I have one more question for our panel, and then we will open up. And I put this picture behind me. I don't know if you can see it or not. That's me with Chi, our panda. As Sonia mentioned, in my other world, so I'm going to change my hat. I happen to be the global president of something called WWF. We are the largest environmental organization in the world. We work in about, one of the largest. We work in about 100 countries. We have about 20,000 environmental professionals who work for us. I put that because I'm going to ask the tough but obvious questions to my panel. right? This is a question I think a lot about right now, and I have a particular answer that I will come to after they speak. There is a lot of anxiety for anyone who's working on environment or sustainable development right now in the world. Are there jobs? Is there going to be things? There are lots of changes happening, certainly in this country, but also elsewhere in the world. Is there money? Are there jobs? Is there work? Did I make the wrong choice? All of those things that are going through people's heads, especially people who are going to be looking for jobs and careers and are young and looking forward to their life. What do you say to them, any of you? I have something to say, but I will come to that. I asked the panda what the right answer is, and I will share that later. But let me first come to my panel. What do you say? Who wants to go?
Well, you've had me go first, so why break your
Sure.
flow? I think we as an environmentalists, well, I call myself an environmentalist. I feel like protecting the environment in the world is, to use Salia's thought, it's a way of thinking. I think it's really been easy to feel anxious at any time about the fate of the planet. If you're somebody who thinks and pays attention to the world, when I was at BU, it was about apartheid, it was about acid rain. Climate change was not something that anybody was even talking about at that time. So, but there were other things, threats to national parks, threats to the ocean, the depletion of our fisheries. The list goes on and on. I think I've gotten to this place in my head where I think about all of the things that millions and billions of other people are doing to save the planet all the time in whatever way they can. It's really easy to think somehow we're alone, but we're not. Look at this panel discussion right now. We have all said that we have very similar overlapping values and interests. And I promise you there are millions and billions of other people who share in their own ways and in their own thoughts and values systems, share the same sense of urgency and importance. So I think it's really important not to get stuck in kind of the doom and gloom way of thinking, but to really focus on what you can do, because there are a lot of other people doing other things too. And I guess that's the most important thing in terms of jobs. The planet's always going to be here, and it's always going to need stewardship and
Well, that's
tending.
what we are trying to do for it to be here. Yeah, the planet is
Exactly. And so I tend to not get kind of freaked out and panicked by the administration of the moment. So I think it's really important to just remember that the administration, the Trump administration, I'm just going to be really blunt about it, is making huge mistakes. It's on the wrong track. Those are my opinions. Others can disagree. That's fine. But its day is going to come and go. And in the end, this planet is always going to be here, and it's always going to need help.
Salia?
Well, I think now more than ever, we need stewardship for environmental practice. I think now more than ever, those that are passionate need to pursue this with a sense of urgency and purpose and be ever more sure that they're in the right space. I think that sustainability is no longer, it's not a niche area anymore. I really truly think that it's being integrated into every sector. I've worked for a short while consulting with a private sector firm on how to integrate ESG into their frame. There's no current environmental social governance standard yet, but they're coming up with it. So it's not just it's not just organizations that work in the field, but businesses that need to be sensitized now and to show that version of themselves, because I think that it's truly touching every business, it's touching the government, it's touching nonprofits, it's touching technology. I think that there is an even wider range of integration of job opportunities that did not exist at, like, say, a decade ago, like Cameron said. I also think that again, emphasis on creativity, one can find roles that are at the cross section between policy, environmental consulting, renewable energy development. You can take some of that those hard skills. You can take some of the soft skills in negotiation and advocacy, and really make something out of it. But I think that there are many pathways to go down for people who have the passion for this field. And I think that there's also the panic is definitely there, but I think that there's an equal need to push forward with that. And I think that the job market is prime for work like this, and we need more than ever to find creative ways to get in. And like Cameron said, this could be something temporary. This doesn't stop us from knowing that the Earth is our only home. And I'm excited to hear what Panda says, but and also what Eric says. But I think that there are definitely fulfilling and financially viable options for work out there and career paths. I think I raised my hand earlier to the question that was asked before this, and because I wanted to mention that we, as part of the program, are made to do a capstone project, and I remember that our client was a political think tank that worked in Beijing to directly influence policy that the National Congress in China was writing on the environment and on environmental projects that they were having abroad, especially in energy and infrastructure. I remember getting in touch with them a couple months later, once I got my first job out of grad school, and we signed an MOU with them. So I think a part of it is also being creative during the program and post-program, knowing what you can leverage, the contacts you make, the friends you make. I have a friend halfway across the world in Kinshasa. She's building apps to track education outcomes in DRC. I'm trying to figure out ways to work with her. So it is really what you make of it. And you got to have that creative thinking to really make the most of it. And I think now's the time.
Eric?
Sure, no, absolutely. I'd say, I guess just representing kind of the business or the private sector perspective here, it does feel like a scary moment for environmentalism, for sustainability, for ESG. Obviously, we're seeing left and right, countries walking back their commitments, companies walking back their commitments. But I do think that the shift that we've seen in the past, I don't know, decade, 2 decades, of kind of maybe decades specifically, of kind of the private sector embracing sustainability is not, elements of it will last, right? There are companies that I think are serious about the commitments that they've made. There are leaders of companies, whether they be big, public corporations or smaller firms and everything in between. There are a lot of people out there that work in industry, in the economy, in the private sector, that care about this because of just the broader swell that we've seen in terms of interest and knowledge and momentum and conversation and dialogue around climate and environmental issues. People do care about this, and yes, there is that bottom line consideration, and maybe that always will win out at the end of the day. But I think part of it is just people are more passionate about this across the board, or they have been up until maybe recently when we've seen some pushback. But it's also, I think, true that it's gotten easier for business to align climate and sustainability with economic and financial considerations, right? Renewable energy has gotten a lot cheaper over the past, years and decades. Dealing with water, right? I think in the work that I've done, especially in terms of kind of industrial water, industrial engagement with water, more and more companies who maybe never would have even thought about their water footprint. It's such a small percentage of their operating budget that it's just not something that they think about. All of a sudden, if the data center that you're building or the factory that you're building is in an area that is running out of water, or the community is not willing to share those water resources anymore, then you have a problem, and you've got a ton of sunk cost in a factory that you can't operate, right? So I think for reasons that are not um, only altruistic, companies are thinking about sustainability and energy and water resources, and dealing with them in new ways. And even though we will see these big high profile shifts of, oh, this bank has left the, net zero climate finance pact, or this bank has left, you will see those, and they are really disheartening, and they're scary. But I do think that there are still plenty of companies out there and organizations out there that actually do care about this and can make it work. Maybe they're not going to talk about it as much. Maybe they're not going to advertise it because they don't want to draw as much attention to it in an environment that's so hostile to it. But it's not the end of ESG or corporate sustainability by any means.
Excellent, excellent. And I see a hand, and we'll just open up for questions. I promised I'll tell you what the panda told me. And in a way, it's the same thing that all three of you have said. I return back to Salih was very kind to sort of open up with us and talk about the struggles of finding a job. It wasn't as if everything was going to be easy 6 months ago, right? So I do not recall any time in my 40 years when students coming out thought, hey, they're just jobs hanging out there. All I need is to pluck one. That was not true 6 months ago. That was not true 6 years ago. That was certainly not true when I came out. I can promise, empirically, I can promise that despite how many jobs may vanish, there are more jobs in the environment today than there were when I came out with a degree. When I came out with a degree, people said, "What the hell is this thing that you do?" Right? So perspective is very useful, actually. The exciting thing about this field, but also the reality is, it's there is a flubber quality to it. This is why we are different from mechanical engineers, right? A mechanical engineering job is a mechanical engineering job is a mechanical engineering job. But every environmental job, as you've just heard, is a different thing. The task is fitting the right person with the right goal. My sense also is that yes, the panic is real, or the angst is real. Yes, the concern is real, but yes, the work is also real. I'm not just, all of us are saying that, not just because it's a nice thing to say, but there are things to be done, and someone will have to do them. Right? The question is that we will have to be creative, as we have always had to be creative, in understanding where those jobs are. And I hope one of the things you get from this panel is that those jobs may be, or that those careers, not just jobs, those careers may be in surprising places. They may be in political campaigns. They may be in companies. I was just recently, a few months ago, back in January, actually, at something called the World Economic Forum, and I ended up at a dinner conversation with Al Gore, which was different, I won't talk about, but the other person on the table was the CEO of IKEA, one of the most interesting companies. And we were talking about this thing of companies falling off. And he said, look, those who came on the bandwagon will get off the bandwagon. And I remember him saying to me, we are hiring. And IKEA is actually one of the most interesting companies. A number of years ago, Eric might have heard this in my class, I used to ask students, who do you think hires the highest number of environmental PhDs? I don't know if this is still true, but at that point, the answer was Exxon. You might think it is odd, but because they had so much cleaning up to do after the Valdez and other spills. So what I'm trying to get at is there is environmental work out there. That work's shape will change, whether it is in this sector or that sector, or this NGO or that NGO might change, but that work will remain. Your task is to mold yourself to that thing. We at WWF have about 20,000 environmental professionals who work for us. We are very worried about this. We are very worried about where this is going, but I checked before this call. There are a whole host of our offices who are still hiring. I can't help you with any of those jobs, by the way, but there are people who are going to be applying for them. There are, because there is going to be that work. So that's my sense, that worrying is not going to help. Being creative, listening to what our panel has told you about skills, about creativeness, about being innovative, about looking at places that may not seem obvious, that might help. On that long lecture, which I apologize for, let me open up and see who has a question. We have the letter A on my screen with their hand up.
Hi, yeah. Um, First of all, thank you all so much for such an insightful panel. It was really,
Anna.
really enlightening. Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, so I am specifically interested in the private sector sustainability, whether it be consulting or sustainable investing slash finance. And for me, at least, as a non-business major, sometimes the term finance can be kind of like daunting, uh, because sometimes, to me, it implies kind of a higher barrier to entry and all these technological skills that maybe I haven't necessarily learned as an IR major. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to know if any of you could impart any advice if to kind of penetrate that sector without having the same, I can't run you through a DCF, but whether there are certain hard skills that you think I should be able to show for before an interview, or whether it varies from firm to firm, or yeah, thanks.
Cam?
I think, Anna, I need to ask another question or two. You mentioned you're getting your degree in IR. Are you open to getting a degree or at least taking classes in finance?
Yeah, definitely. I forgot to mention I'm a double major, sorry, in econ. So, a little bit of, obviously I have an econ background, and yeah, I was thinking about taking the 2 credit finance course.
Great.
You.
Okay, good. So, if when I started out, I wanted to become a lawyer because I wanted to sue the bastards into compliance and to make sure that the bad guys were going to do the right thing and so on and so forth. If I were to do it again, I probably would go into finance, because if you want to get anything good done in this world, you have to figure out how to pay for it. And finance is a great pathway to do that. So I really encourage you to keep training yourself up on finance. In terms of looking at the private sector, the other benefit is, once you have a base in finance, which I do not have, I've had to learn it as I go, you become much more invaluable, because no matter where you work, there is always going to be a demand for people who can problem solve when it comes to investing and how to pay for things. So I don't know if I'm answering your question yet now, but I sure am encouraging you to keep doing what you're doing, because I think you're on the right path.
Eric?
So much.
Yeah, if I can just to follow up on that, I mean, I completely agree. I also don't have a finance background. I don't have a business background. I didn't really take any of those skills. I think, the courses I took at Pardee, there were a number of intersections with kind of macroeconomics and financial policy, and I learned a bit of the language, but ultimately I think that's been the trick for me, is just learning the language, right? Like I didn't have a business background, but my work right out of Pardee was analyzing business decisions and corporate company strategy with regard to the water technology industry, right? So just being able to kind of pick up the lingo, understand the key concepts, even if you don't spend another 4 years getting, or 2 years or 4 years getting a degree in finance, learning what you can both on the fly, but yeah, I mean, you're early enough in your career that I think if you've got an opportunity to take some classes, do some certifications online, or whatever the case may be, find a way to develop those skills so that you're at least conversant in it. And even if you don't want to be a financial professional, an accountant, knowing enough of that language and those concepts to be able to have a conversation and apply those skills to the areas that you do want to work in, I think goes a really long way. I mean, so not in any way to disagree with Cam. I think if you can learn it, go ahead and learn it, but you can get around not knowing it, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And I think Cam did something similar. So
yeah. No, this is very good. Other questions? Let me add. I did not train in finance, but I end up now doing a fair amount of work in climate finance in particular. And my gut instinct is this. This is building on both those answers. My gut instinct is this. If it comes down to being between two candidates, if the job is about environmental finance, writ broadly, right? Being very practical here, and there are two candidates, and one has done only environment and the other has done only finance, my guess is that the one who has done environment will have a leg up. Now, if the finance guy has also done environment, which they are likely not to have, then they may have a leg up. And similarly, if the environment person, the person who has training in environment and international environment and development, has some understanding of finance, they will have a leg up. Now, again, I'm making very broad strokes, but here is the reason why I'm saying the problem in environmental finance, particularly climate finance, is understanding the environment side. How do I value the Mekong River? How am I going to get value for a financer out of the Congo Basin, right? So what I'm trying again to say is to repeat what all of our colleagues have said. Take those skills seriously that you have been learning and take them with some confidence in being able to apply. This is true for just about so many things in our field, that they are all now about environment and something. Environment and finance, environment and governance, environment and management, right? And that is your ability to have taken in from your classes, to have taken in from your experience, that innovative way to put it together again. We'll take maybe one more question before we end up, if we do have a question. I do, okay, we have a question on the top left of my screen, wherever you are. Go for it.
Hi there. My name is Camila. I'm currently a senior at Boston University and I study international relations. I've actually taken one of Professor Najam's classes before on NGO and nonprofit management, which was a great class. Thank you all for being here. This conversation has really like run the gamut in terms of what careers are available out there in environment and sustainability. Um, I'm kind of curious about what the differences or maybe what the advantages and disadvantages are of working in this field at different levels. So if you can speak to the municipal level versus the national level or the private sector, that would be great.
Okay. Well, Adil, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and take a shot at that as somebody who's worked for federal
Sure.
government and municipal. And I guess I forgot to mention, I also did a legal internship at the United Nations Environment Program in Africa. So if you want to count that, even international. The advantages and disadvantages of both. Stripping out, whatever your personal interests are, mine have always been international. If you look at how to protect the environment from an international perspective, you're generally going to be looking at a global perspective. But what is a global perspective? A global perspective is made up of its components, which are nations. What are the components of nations? States, provinces, and so on. What are the components of those? Municipalities. Doing work at the municipal level, which is what I'm doing now, gives you the chance to really be on the front lines. As we all express concern about what the administration is doing now, one of the ways in which I sleep at night is by knowing that I'm doing really good things for the second largest county in the United States right now. And by doing that, I think we are able to demonstrate, to pilot approaches that can be useful at the state level, at the national level, and back up to the international level. Let me give you an example. Our agency, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, is the second largest public property owner in Cook County. We have about 1,000 acres plus or minus. One of the things that I'm trying to do is pilot urban agriculture on our properties. So it can reduce floodwater, it can help fight climate change. We optimize the use of our property to do that, and we fight food insecurity. As far as I know, we are the only public water utility in the United States starting to think about the intersection. Again, there's that Venn diagram I was talking about before, the intersection between water policy and urban ag, because there are overlaps. So all of them have their advantages and disadvantages. I would say start out with the one you're most passionate and interested in, and nothing prevents you from transcending borders and moving into a different jurisdictional level.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are out of time, but I do have one quick question, and then we'll make it very, very quick. But before that, do please check out the comment that Sonia put on the chat about Rabobank. But thank you, Sonia, for putting that. Rabobank, for those who may not know, is a truly interesting organization, probably the most, I'm guessing nearly certainly the world's largest bank that is focused on farmers and agriculture. It's based out of the Netherlands, and that's why, because which is a very agriculture heavy country. So do check it out. But I also highlight that because, just as we talked about water, food is another of those cutting edge things that as you think about sort of keywords, the keyword may not be environment, the keyword may not be climate, it may be water, it may be food, it may be development. So that's the message you're getting from everyone, that make it broad. People who are working in food are nearly all at this point, not all, many of them, certainly not all, but many of them are very focused on what we would call sustainable development issues, whether it is about food waste, whether it is, as Cam said, about food security, and so on and so forth. Last question for the panel before we thank them is the very same question I started with. Having now had this conversation, one line, one sentence advice to those who are still listening. Best advice that you can give to them at this stage. And Eric, why don't I start with you this time and end with Cam?
One line, one sentence. Just go out and do it. Just go out,
Just do it.
find somewhere to just do it. Just exactly. There are opportunities out there. You just, you'll find them. You'll do the work. You'll grow. You'll move on to the next one. Just go out and do it.
Whatever the odds, if you try, the odds will be even worse if you don't try. Salia.
Put the risk to the first step and believe in yourself. There's so much you can do. Just take the first step. Bring toxic positivity to it, at least to the intention of getting out. Lots of work to be done, and put your passion to the risk.
Cam?
Sure. And I want to make sure we don't leave without hearing about Panda. I don't think we've heard about Panda.
Yeah.
I would say my one word for advice is tenacity. And just to explain that, you don't have to be the richest person in the world. You don't have to be the best looking. You don't have to, any of that stuff. But if you stick to it, if you're persistent, you're gonna get traction. So I know that's true for myself. I don't consider myself the smartest person in the world, but when I clamp in, I don't let go, and I just keep going.
Yeah. And mine would be the word that hasn't come up. It's surprising it hasn't come up on this topic, and that word is network. You may think you don't have a network, but I can promise you have a much bigger network than you think. That network is all the professors that you see on that picture and beyond that you've taken classes with. It's the students you've taken classes with. It's the alum that you may or may not know. But that's what network means. Network doesn't mean that someone is going to get you a job. But network is a set of connections that are all learning opportunities, learning about what is out there. Certainly, even if you're graduating in a few weeks, use those to polish up those networks wherever they are. Let me join me, please, in thanking everyone and for our alum panel, especially because you haven't seen this. Let me show you what is coming to a screen near you, hopefully very soon. Has that come up? Yes. If you see that picture, that is the new building of the Pardee School. Work will begin next year. We expect it to be done the year after that. That's a great pride and joy. It's going to be the most environment friendly building on campus, the only one that looks to the river. It is going to be the largest all wood structure, not just in Boston, not just in Massachusetts, but in all of New England. And it's going to be one of the most energy efficient building there. So very, very proud of it, but so should you. And this goes back to the lesson that we were all talking about. The work will continue, whatever the situation now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the panel. Please join me in thanking them and best wishes to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. And like I said, I never had a conversation with a Pardee alum who would turn down help from students. So, definitely use this opportunity to connect with them. And thank you so much for all the panelists and make our Earth Day a true Earth Day. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Good seeing you.
Great to see you.